The Williams family thought they'd found their slice of the American dream when they signed the papers for 7 Meadowlark Lane. Sunrise Estates was everything the brochure promised. Pristine sidewalks, identical maple saplings evenly spaced along the curb, and that unmistakable smell of fresh paint and new beginnings. Michael and Sarah had stretched their savings to the limit, but watching their 8-year-old twins, Emma and Ethan, race through the empty rooms of their new home made it all worthwhile. "Daddy, which room is mine?" Emma had asked, her eyes wide with possibility. "Whichever one you want, princess," Michael had answered, not yet knowing that within a month, both children would be sleeping in their parents' room, too terrified to be alone after dark. The first week in Sunrise Estates passed in a blur of unpacked boxes and neighborhood introductions. The development was about half full. 23 of the planned 48 homes had been completed and sold. The Williams were the third family on Meadowlark Lane, joining the Patels at number 3 and the elderly Hansons at number 11. It was Mrs. Hanson who first mentioned the dreams, though Sarah didn't think much of it at the time. "Settling in all right, dear?" Mrs. Hanson had asked, bringing over a homemade apple pie. "No trouble sleeping, I hope?" "Just the usual new house adjustments," Sarah had replied. "Michael says he keeps hearing the house settling, whatever that means." Mrs. Hanson's smile had faltered. "Yes, well, new houses do make their own noises. Though Howard and I have been having the strangest dreams since we moved in. Must be the country air." That night, Sarah dreamed of water. Cold, dark water rising slowly around her ankles. She was standing in the center of their unfinished basement, except the concrete floor had crumbled away, revealing rich, black soil beneath. From this soil, water bubbled up, not in a violent gush, but in a patient, inevitable seep. Sarah tried to move, but found her feet were rooted to the spot. The water rose to her knees, then her waist, bringing with it the sweet, sick smell of rotting vegetation and something metallic, like old pennies. "It isn't sealed properly," a voice whispered from somewhere in the darkness. "Some things shouldn't be buried." Sarah awoke gasping, her nightshirt damp with sweat. Beside her, Michael slept fitfully, his face contorted in what looked like pain or fear. At breakfast, Michael was unusually quiet, nursing his coffee with dark circles beneath his eyes. Sarah asked. "Weird dream," he muttered. "About the basement." Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. "Water?" she asked. "Was there water in the basement?" Michael's eyes widened. "How did you know?" Before they could discuss it further, Ethan shuffled into the kitchen, looking pale. "Mom, I don't feel good," he said. "I had a scary dream about a hole in the ground with water, and someone was in the water, trying to get out." By the end of their second week at Sunrise Estates, Sarah had confirmed that every household on their street was experiencing similar dreams. The Patel's 5-year-old had become so frightened she developed a stutter. The Millers at number 15 had gone to stay with relatives. Even the Thompsons' dog refused to enter their basement, howling pitifully whenever they tried to bring it downstairs. Desperate for answers, Sarah began researching the history of the land. Sunrise Estates had been built on what was once the Carson family farm, when the last surviving Carsons sold to the developers. Nothing unusual had been reported in the local news articles covering the sale. Just another family farm giving way to suburban sprawl. It was during a community barbecue, organized as a distraction from the collective insomnia plaguing the neighborhood, that Sarah met Jerome, one of the construction workers who had prepared the site. "You folks having trouble sleeping?" he asked, keeping his voice low as he flipped burgers on the communal grill. Sarah studied his face. The deep creases around his eyes suggested he was no stranger to the dreams himself. "How did you know?" she asked. Jerome sighed. "Because we found something during the excavation, something the developers told us to keep quiet about." According to Jerome, the construction crew had uncovered an old well while digging the foundations for what would become the community center. Unlike the modern concrete wells, this one had been lined with stacked fieldstone in the style common in the late 1800s. It had been sealed with a crude concrete cap, which cracked during excavation. That well wasn't on any of the property surveys, Jerome explained. And it wasn't empty. They'd found bones at the bottom. Not just animal remains, but what the foreman had suspected were human bones, along with what looked like personal effects. A tarnished locket, the remains of leather shoes, scraps of clothing. But when the foreman called the developer about the discovery, he was told to fill it with concrete and continue with the build schedule. No police report, no archaeological survey. They didn't want the delays, Jerome said, his voice bitter. Sealing that well was my last job on the site. I quit the next day. That night, Sarah's dream changed. She was still in the basement with the rising water, but this time, she wasn't alone. A figure was taking shape in the murky water. A woman in what appeared to be a long, old-fashioned dress, her hair drifting around her face like dark seaweed. The water around her was darker, contaminated with what Sarah now recognized as old blood. "They've forgotten," the woman said, her voice somehow clear despite the water. "But the land remembers. The water remembers." Sarah jerked awake to find Michael sitting upright beside her, trembling. "You saw her too," he whispered. It wasn't a question. The following day, 3 more families announced they were putting their homes up for sale. The development's Facebook group was buzzing with stories of the dreams, each one more detailed than the last. The woman in the well had begun to appear to everyone, and she was becoming more insistent, more clear in her demands. The Williams didn't have the luxury of leaving. They'd sunk everything into their down payment, and the local real estate market was already whispering about those troubled homes in Sunrise Estates. So Sarah took matters into her own hands, organizing a meeting at their home with everyone who was willing to listen. 22 people crowded into their living room that evening, all with the same haunted look, the same desperation for a solution. "I think we need to acknowledge what happened," Sarah told them. "Someone was killed and hidden in that well, and when the development was built, they were just paved over, forgotten." "So what, we hold a seance?" Someone scoffed, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his fear. "No," Michael said, surprising everyone, including Sarah. "We investigate, we find out who she was, and we give her a proper memorial." It took weeks of research. Sarah and 3 other neighbors combed through historical society records, old newspapers, and census data. The local library archivist, initially skeptical, became engrossed in their search, helping them piece together the story of Elizabeth Carson, who had run away from her family's farm in 1891, leaving behind a 6-month-old daughter. Except Elizabeth hadn't run away. According to their research, she'd threatened to expose her brother-in-law's embezzlement from the family business. She vanished shortly after, and her brother-in-law took control of the farm's finances. Armed with this information and Jerome's testimony, they approached the police. An excavation was ordered, focusing on the area beneath the half-built community center. The remains they found confirmed their worst fears and validated their dreams. On a cool autumn evening, 6 months after moving into Sunrise Estates, every resident gathered around a small memorial garden planted where the well had once been. A simple stone marker told Elizabeth's story, acknowledging the injustice of her death and the attempt to erase her existence. As the sun set, Sarah felt a weight lift, not just from her shoulders, but from the land itself. That night, for the first time since moving to Meadowlark Lane, she dreamed of nothing but darkness and silence. The dreams of water stopped for everyone in Sunrise Estates that night. But sometimes, after heavy rains, the residents swear they can hear a faint sound coming from beneath the memorial garden. Not the anguished cries they'd come to dread in their nightmares, but something that sounds almost like gratitude. For the Williams family, and for all of Sunrise Estates, home had finally become just that, a place of safety and rest. They had given Elizabeth Carson what she had been asking for all along, remembrance. And in return, she had given them peace. But Sarah keeps a journal now, recording the history of their home of the land beneath it, because she knows better than most that while people may forget, the land remembers, the water remembers, and some stories refuse to be buried.